So I would like to talk about a technology that has been out for about 3 years now called CRISPR. And this kit is for editing genomes in animals and humans. In the field of genome engineering, the term CRISPR, or clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, is often used loosely to refer to the entire CRISPR-Cas9 system, which can be programmed to target specific stretches of genetic code and to edit DNA at precise locations. These tools allow researchers to permanently modify genes in living cells and organisms, and in the future may make it possible to correct mutations at precise locations in the human genome to treat genetic causes of disease. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Well, we can kind of stretch our mind a little bit and see where this might go. In September 2015, the Zhang lab demonstrated successful harnessing of a different CRISPR system for genome editing called CRISPR CPF1, which has had the potential for even simpler and more precise genome engineering. It is so precise it can actually edit DNA or biohack down to a single letter. Changes in the genome that may have taken centuries now may be made in a short time. By their own admission, this technology is the most powerful in the history of science and comparable to the splitting of an atom. Quote, for better or worse, every life on Earth will soon be affected by our own ability to reprogram the software of life. So I would like to take this into a book called Jasher, extra biblical book, mentioned in the Bible quite a few times actually. We can see the same theme unfolding once again before our eyes. So this is, I believe, chapter 4, verse 17. And every man made unto himself a god, and they robbed and plundered every man his neighbor as well as his relative, and they corrupted the earth. And the earth was filled with violence. And their judges and rulers went to the daughters of men and took their wives by force from the husbands according to their choice. And the sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and taught the mixture of animals of one species with the other, in order therewith to provoke the Lord. And God saw the whole earth, and it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon earth, all men and all animals. So, as in the days of Noah, we have a technology that has been released to the public that has broad implications, ultimately redefining and replacing the original creation with the so-called better model. We have to ask ourselves, at what point will this shift into the belief that an unedited life form that has been immaculately conceived and perfected according to a brave new created standard be considered a blight on supermankind? And this new post-human and animal hybridized and engineered ecological landscape. Imagine natural conception and birth being illegal because that would be considered a possible threat to this new terraformed earth that has been corrected to fit the new life in it. There are already successful attempts that have been made worldwide to sterilize individuals both willingly and unknowingly for quite some time. This is an article from nature.com. The prospect of editing the genome of a human embryo is still in its early stages, but the ability to prevent the inheritance of some conditions already exists. Prenatal screening, which has advanced to the point that doctors can sample a developing fetus's DNA through its mother's blood, gives the parents the option to terminate the pregnancies when a disease or disability is diagnosed. In Europe, for example, the prevalence of a Down syndrome diagnosis during pregnancy has risen from 20 cases per 10,000 in 1990 to 23 cases per 10,000 today, as the average age of women having babies has increased. But the number of children born with the syndrome has stayed level at about 11 per 10,000 because many women whose fetuses are diagnosed with the condition terminate their pregnancies. In the U.S., pregnancies in which a Down syndrome diagnosis is made are terminated in 67 to 85% of the cases. By surveying women whose fetuses and babies are diagnosed with Down syndrome, and by compiling similar surveys from around the world, medical geneticist Brian Scottco of the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston has found that doctors sometimes advise women to terminate or give up adoption babies diagnosed prenatally with Down syndrome. They can influence the decision by using phrases such as, "I'm sorry," or "I have some bad news to share." For instance, 34% of 71 Dutch women who terminated their pregnancy after a Down syndrome diagnosis said that their doctors did not even mention the possibility of carrying the pregnancy to term when discussing their options. This story comes from a guy in Louisville, Kentucky named Mark Leach, whose 11-year-old daughter has Down syndrome. Says that he and his wife have been asked many times, especially when his wife was pregnant with their second child, whether they knew beforehand that Juliet would be born with Downs. They didn't. Some people are simply curious, Leach says, but for others there's judgment in that question. The ability to do something beforehand imposes a sense of you should not only do what's right for you, but what's right for society. Leach says it bothers him. He says that although government and private health insurers routinely pay for prenatal diagnosis, he recently learned that his school system is discontinuing support for the learning specialists who have been helping Juliet to thrive in math and reading. So the only capable hands to be able to make these types of decisions for our bodies would be the one that made our bodies. And we have an identity in Christ. He is our identity. We don't have an identity otherwise. We have a personality that has been crafted through experience and through trials and whatnot. But our identity is in Him, and He actually gave us the right to reign and rule with Him on earth. A lot of people don't realize this yet, and they actually disempower themselves from receiving that revelation because of their unbelief in what has been given. So I look at this whole transhumanism spect as the false new creation model, because in Christ we are the new creation. So instead of actually feeling the adoption that He gave us as a son and a daughter on earth, with all power vested in us, we have decided to deviate outside of those lines and go back to another fallen mindset where we feel like, we can modify our bodies and we can attain godhood on our own through science and technology. So I just want, to put this out there and for people to think about this more in depth and less in the flesh and more in the spiritual element, because we have to understand this from a spiritual perspective to be able to see everything that's there. If we were only to look at 50%, we're only going to see 50%. So we have to include the largest percent, which makes who we are, which is the spirit. We are spirit. So I just want to thank you for watching this, anyone that actually stumbled across this YouTube video. And I hope to do more videos like this. Thank you so much. Have a good night.